I am extremely joyous and very grateful today to have an opportunity to be in this space with Kai Shanti. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate this.
I really appreciate being here. I'm really glad you reached out, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't take this for granted. You're willing to be present here in this space is something that's very appreciated. I I wanted to start out the conversation if I could, and I tend to start a little more broadly and just a little more general. I've had an opportunity to read a little bit about you, but what I love about these conversations is to have the opportunity to hear from you and your own words about your life journey, and it's even more so about your inner life journey. So I thought I would
Mhm.
ask you if I could, what your inner life journey means to you at a deeper level.
My life journey is about God. That's what it basically comes down to. I know there's a much bigger scenario, storyline to that, but the ultimate my ultimate life journey is about God. So I think that I started out my life with maybe that idea, but not really present with that. That came into play probably in my 20s. I had a rough start, but
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure I chose it that way. I chose to come in to have that kind of a beginning and to experience a lot of things. I've experienced a lot of things. Like I feel like I could write 10 books about my life I've experienced, and I've been through so many different lifetimes in this lifetime. So I think that it's all been towards one goal, and that is just the realization of the divine self. And when I was a deadhead, but for me, that was the more of the spiritual aspect of it that I like to explore. There were the spinners at the dead shows where they literally were doing like Sufi dances. And
Wow.
I
Yeah.
would just spin for 4 hours straight or something like that. So I look over different aspects of my life and I say, oh, that was a spiritual practice. That was a spiritual practice. I just didn't fully know what I was doing. I would go to rainbow gatherings, but I would always find the people that were meditating. And I found this beautiful man, Alex, who would just come out of the mountains for 6 months by himself meditating. Those were the people that I would gravitate towards, even though I didn't really know why at the time. And then I went to LA, and funny enough, I just connected with a friend who initially brought me to LA because I was in San Francisco. I was a stripper for a while in San Francisco with, again, that was all these kind of goddesses that were doing these spiritual practices through dancing, like very
Yeah.
consciously doing this. Um, but I met a woman who was doing makeup for something I was doing, who said, "Why don't you come to LA and do real modeling?" And I moved in with her. And funny enough, I haven't talked to her for 20 years, maybe. And I just talked to her again the other day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was interesting. But so I went to LA, and I've always been very into music since I was a child as well. Music is a beautiful expression for me. And my family was all musicians. My mom was a music teacher. So I got into the music scene in LA, and I ended up marrying a rock star. So I got into that world, which was very off balance, and whew, it was a little crazy. But out of that, I started doing Kundalini yoga, the Yogi Bhajan 3HO style. And from that, I moved to Nashville, and I met my Shaktipat guru when I was 27. And that's when I had a big Kundalini awakening. So that was the beginning of a really a long journey. I'm 55 now, so a long journey of becoming whatever I am now. That very intense journey of Kundalini awakening and growth through that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I thank you. And I really appreciate that. I don't know, I don't believe out of the years that I have done this that I've had an opportunity to speak with someone who has had those energetic experience, in other words, engaging in the practice of Kundalini yoga, and also, receiving Shaktipat or receiving, and I also want to make this accessible for people who may have a spiritual life or spiritual inclinations, but may not be familiar with the Hindu, I realize there's numerous Hindu paths, but in this case, I thought it would be very interesting, and this is just coming up in the moment, if you were comfortable to speak a little bit about that experience and
Absolutely.
just, how that has affected your journey and your consciousness moving forward from there.
Yes. So when I was when I first started taking the Kundalini yoga classes, I wasn't aware of what Kundalini was. That was more of a practice. It's where you're actually doing physical poses and movements and breath and all of those things, and it's guided. So, but I did have some experiences during those classes. I had an out of body experience. I had just some really crazy meditative experiences. Like I had this thing where I felt like my third eye was just buzzing with like 1,000 bees, and I could hear it and feel it. And I fell backwards, and little experiences like, well, big, I should call them little experiences. They were big experiences before my actual awakening. So then I moved in with this Shaktipat guru. So Kundalini Shaktipat is a Hindu term, but obviously it's not just a Hindu practice, because this exists in every single mystical tradition, or the base of every tradition. A lot of people say Jesus or Yeshua was very much in, the Kundalini, and Mary Magdalene,
Yeah.
and all of them. So the Kundalini is the life force energy that dwells within each and every one of us, but it's said to be asleep, that once our body is formed, the divine energy comes in, forms the body, and then the energy goes to sleep, and we kind of forget everything of who we are, and we live in this world, this reality, whatever this reality is that we've created. And then the point of life is to awaken this energy so that we can come back into God consciousness and recognize who we truly are. But in the process of that awakening, so I will call it Kundalini awakening, and I use those terms because I was in the Shaktipat tradition, and I think I've had a lot of lifetimes in that tradition. So that when I surrender to the Shakti or the Kundalini energy, which we can also refer to as the Divine Mother or God in the female form, it's what a lot of people might conceive of as channeling, but it's where I just surrender to the energy, and she comes through my body and she does the work. So she'll speak through me, she works through me. When I work with people, I'm literally just surrendering to that God energy, and that energy works through me for that person. Because if I'm in my ego consciousness, I don't know what that person needs. So I recognize that I have to back off, and it's not me in that process. So the Kundalini energy awakens. So I do that with people. I allow the energy to come through to awaken the energy in other people. Also, people come to me who have already had Kundalini awakenings, and I can help them balance it and just help them evolve their process more easily. So that is, so the process of the awakening is when we start our path to consciousness, to grace, to truth, to divinity, to our true self, to love, to all of those things. And it's quite a process, and everyone experiences it very differently, but it can be a very intense process. So when my Kundalini was awakened, I had an intense very intense process. But I'm not surprised. My whole life had been intense up until that point. I had already had, many experiences with LSD. And so those kinds of things weren't unfamiliar to me. Like having intense experiences, and my whole life kind of was emotional and intense. So it wasn't super scary to me, but I understand how with some people it can be scary, because you're literally watching this energy awaken in you, and it starts doing what it wants to do to provide a platform for you to become enlightened. And that can look like a lot of different things, but for some people, it might feel like you're out of control, because you are. Your ego's losing control. The divine's taking over. But you can have create what are called kriyas, or spontaneous movements, where the body can go into spontaneous yoga poses. It can start shaking. You know, you might feel something moving up the spine. Some people feel a direct energy that shoots up the spine. Anything. I mean, my first Kriya was this. I remember this.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not doing that. That's just happening. I don't know why I remembered that, but that was my very first thing that happened that I was like, and then you'll get spontaneous breathing. Also, your mental activity can get crazy because it's also purifying your mind and your thoughts. So even with me now, people will say, I couldn't stop thinking that entire meditation. I feel like I accomplished nothing. And I'm like, no, you are, you know, the Shakti's clearing out your mind. Just try to observe it as much as possible, but it's part of the process. Deep emotional things can happen, anger, sadness, laughing. You know, you can just start spontaneously laughing. All these things are clearing out the system. So she's just working through what are called our nadis, our nerve channels, to clear us out because we have so many things in us that need to be cleared out from this lifetime and so many
Oh,
previous
absolutely.
lifetimes and God knows what. We have stuff that needs to be cleared out. So she just gets in there, and the more we can surrender to it and just let the Kundalini or God, I mean, I use Kundalini, God, grace interchangeably because to me it's all the same. And I also like to make it accessible to people that aren't necessarily in the Hindu tradition because it is not a Hindu thing. it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
an
That's the
everybody
way that I
thing.
found out about that. And my apologies. I should not
No, go ahead.
have
Yeah.
said it that way, because I definitely do recognize what you're saying, that this is certainly not exclusive, just, you know, just to that particular tradition. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. But I think some people would get a little thrown off. I've gotten some comments on my YouTube channel on my videos about Jesus and Christianity and things like that and the devil and all of that. You know, it's scary to people because they don't recognize it
Yeah.
as grace, as God in general. So yeah, kind of lost my train of thought. So but so the Kundalini is that it's the divine awakening. It's that initial response to that spark being triggered by whatever. It can be someone triggering it for you, you know, someone who's in the tradition. It can be just whatever. I mean, it can be karma. Some people just have a spontaneous awakening for seemingly no reason whatsoever. Um, or big events can cause it, childbirth, falling in love, making love, car accidents even. You know, I've heard all the stories about how people's Kundalini has been triggered. I happen to like the path of a master awakening it because then you have that support of not only that master, but their entire lineage helping you to ease the process. So
Yeah,
that
and I'm wondering too, do you find in this work that you do with people, do you find that sometimes people have this kind of awakening spontaneously? I didn't know
it,
if that is ever something that you've encountered someone who just has had that happen somehow, that maybe
mhm,
they're not aware, or they weren't engaging in any practices and yet found
yes.
themselves with with that energy moving.
Yeah, because people will contact me and ask for help. Say, I'm pretty sure I've had a Kundalini awakening. Do you think it is? And can you help me? So yes, and that can be sometimes though they'll tell me that they were doing a certain practice. Like somebody actually just contacted me yesterday or something that said I've been doing Eckhart something with Eckhart Tolle, and then I was lying in bed and I just felt this lightning bolt shoot up my spine. So yeah, I don't think that Eckhart Tolle specifically awakens Kundalini, but for her, that's what did it. You know, so it's a mystery to me. I like that it's a mystery. I don't ever want it to not be a mystery because to me, that's the beauty of it. It's God's grace. You know, will we ever really understand the full divinity? I like being a student. I like being in that not knowing mode. But but I am able to help people through their circumstances usually. whatever if they do have a spontaneous awakening, I can usually help them through or evolve it, you know?
Yeah. Do you find that in some cases with people that you work with, is there any kind of surprise for them to recognize that this energy has always been? And I don't know if this is a fair question, that this energy has always been within them, but not necessarily recognizing it or not being in touch with it. I'm not sure it. I don't know if these words are leading me further away from what I'm asking you, but yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes, if you want to call it, when we start this process is thinking that the Kundalini is an outside energy. Um, so yes, it's for me, it's always about bringing people back into their heart space and to the truth of who they are and recognizing this is me. This is not some outside force that's affecting me, and God isn't out there somewhere that's, is going to come and bless me. No, this is me. This is me awakening to me, the truth of me. And I do think that's a tough one. I mean, nothing in our world supports that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's a tough one to come to the recognition of, because it not only does nothing in our world support it, but I think we don't support it, because that would be egotistical to say that I am the divine, I am consciousness, I am the truth. I don't need to listen to anybody outside of me. I mean, if you're raised Christian and you go to the church and say, I don't need to listen to you, I am the truth within me. I don't, you're not going to be told that you're a good person if you do that.
Yeah, yeah,
So yes, that is one we work on a lot. And also coming to the recognition, like, look, ultimately, you don't need me. You don't need anyone. All you need to do is go into your heart and find your own truth. That's what you need. You know why you came here. You know who you are. You know what you're doing. I can help you to find that if you want me to. But
does that sort of feel like kind of like a hide and seek sometimes? And it's something that people are doing with themselves, that there's some recognition of it, but then there's also the aspect of hiding, uh,
I think
or
it's
hiding that true nature.
yeah, and I think, well, there are so many obstacles to that. I mean, I don't think they're consciously hiding it. I think there are so many obstacles to fear would be one, fear, and whether it's fear of being condemned or just fear of losing your grip on this reality, fear of losing everything you think you have and own, the fear of going insane, because to a lot of people that would look like going insane. When you lose your grip on everything you've learned and everything you've been taught, that would, to a lot of people, feels like insanity. Um, so I think that the deeper, I don't think that people purposefully um, are hiding themselves.
Yeah.
And it's just slowly. And this is why when I work with people, I mean, I need to usually work with them for a while, because it's not something we just want to go and get in there, just like slowly uncovering the layers in as gentle a way as possible. I mean, there are going to be big moments where it's like, oh my God, this is hard, this is scary. But if we can slowly just peel away the layers so you can just start to see a little bit more of the truth and start to release a little bit more of the false belief systems, then eventually we get there, they get there. I'm still learning. I mean, every session I do with someone, I'm learning more about myself. because the divine is showing me through them who I truly am, because I'm not any different than them. I'm the same person as them. We're all one, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting process of watching someone unfold and then unfolding more within myself, and watching someone unfold and unfolding more within myself.
And then as far as your journey, it would be interesting to hear anything that you might feel moved to share, just as far as, once you had that first energetic experience of transmission and receiving that, and then just, where your life journey took you from there.
Mine was not easy. Mine was not easy. And it's really interesting, as now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, wow, if I had had someone like me to guide me, maybe it would have been easier. Maybe that's why I'm doing this work. I
Yeah.
had come out, like I said, of being in a relationship with a famous musician. And I mean, I dated a lot of famous people, actually. So I was just really enmeshed in that world. Plus, I was a musician myself, and a model, and a stripper, and an actress. And so I was very in that whole world. So coming out of that, my Kundalini's awakened. Right. So
Wow. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I had a lot of stuff. I had a lot of stuff to release. I had a lot of stuff to deal with and look at. Plus, I had abuse from childhood and teenage, a lot of really abusive teenage years, college. Just it was there was a lot for me to have to look at. So so my Kundalini awakening, and it wasn't. I mean, I don't want to say it wasn't gentle, because I had a wonderful guru, and I had his whole lineage who still works with me. His lineage, I'm not still with him, but his lineage still works with me astrally,
Yeah.
uh, which is really wonderful. And I had a lot of support in that way. But it was very intense. It was very intense. And Kali, I don't know if you know Kali,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
the
Absolutely. Yeah.
right. So she's kind of the slashes the ego, she's pretty, she's extremely loving. Like, she's come through me and I can feel her love, like the love of a mother, like, ooh, so big. But that love gets rid of parts of you that you don't want, So
Yeah.
she's intense. So she would come through me and she would work with me. And then I would do mantras to goddesses like Chinnamasta, even more intense. She cuts off her own head, and
Oh yeah. Yeah.
even more intense than Kali, but that's what I was drawn to. So I wanted the most intense. So for me, it was it was very intense. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It was very intense. I had extremely high spiritual experiences where I'd be in the realms of light with all of these saints and doing all these practices and just floating into other worlds. And then then I moved back to LA, but I was still in my practice, but I was still back in the world of LA. So I was doing this for a very long time. I mean, until very recently, I was probably doing that still. Even though I have kids now, I moved back to Pennsylvania. I have kids now and an ex-husband, but that's another story. Um, I think I'm finally finding my grounding just in the past 5 years.
Oh wow. Yeah.
I've been doing this
Yeah.
work for a long time, but to the point where I can actually say, no, I'm feeling pretty comfortable now with all of it, with everything, probably the past 5 years. And getting back into music, because like I said, that's a very powerful expression for me. And I was doing that before I got pregnant and had my kids. I made an album, and then I stopped when I had my kids, and now I'm just getting back into that. So somehow the Shakti and the working with people and the Kundalini and the meditations and the music are all coming together in some beautiful way now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my kids play music, so that's been my journey. But it's really interesting. Dion Yogi, who was one of the gurus of my guru, beautiful saint, said he had a very rough beginning of his life in India. I mean, walked bare feet for, all over India, couldn't find his mat. He finally found the master, but he would sleep in these caves in the mountains in the ice cold freezing with nothing, and a lot of times had nothing to eat. I mean, just the extremes of a yogi. But he used to say, I did all this so my devotees wouldn't have to. And I feel like I went through a lot of extremes for a really long time. I guess it's a really long time. I mean, people can go through this for lifetimes, but so that hopefully I can help people in a more gentle way now, so it's like a little more flowing and easy. And I can say, look, I went through this and you're going to be okay. And let's try to move through this a little more quickly and things like that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I spoke with someone years ago that was talking about, having some experiences like this. And I've also heard it said before. Now, I don't know this, if this is true or not, but that, part of the culture, and I don't want to generalize here either, but, that part of the spirit, the spirit, for lack of a better term, the spiritual culture in India, for instance, that there is more of a support system for people that are going through these kinds of openings and these kinds of awakenings. And that sometimes here in the Western world, is it that sometimes it may be looked at more in terms of Western medicine, that this is more of a psychological issue, or more of a behavioral issue, or as far as ability to cope or not cope, or if that, I don't know if this
Yeah.
makes sense or not, but I'm getting the sense that, yeah, that this is the culture that one lives in, something that really
Yes.
determines what that experience is like.
Yes. Yes. And it's sad that there is not support for it in so many cultures, because it's a revered process. I mean, this is it, once we get to this point where we are awakening into our true divinity, our God self, everything drops. Everything drops, and that scares people. It scares your family. Like, if all of a sudden you are completely disconnected from your reality, your family's going to freak out. They don't know
Yeah.
what to do except take you to a shrink, fix them, make them the same as they were. Yeah, there's no support. And hopefully, I mean, obviously, the more that people that wake up, the more people that have these experiences, it's going to have to be faced, and there are going to have to be, things put into place to support people through the process. But it's not. And for some people I work with, I'm all they have, because they are in a very normal situation. And I'm the one that can say to them once a week or whatever, no, you're okay. This is a
Yeah.
high process. All these beings of light are with you, working with you. When you see angels, no, you're not crazy. You're really seeing angels, and they're really loving you, and they're really supporting you. But if no one else is telling and everyone else is saying, look, we're going to put you away in a psycho whatever house, it's rough. I'm so lucky because my awakening did happen here, but it happened in an ashram. And I was able to just stay there with my guru and read books about all the saints that have had these experiences. And so for me, I just saw that it was a very normal process. And all the people around me were having the same experiences. So I was so lucky. Oh my God, I was so lucky. So that's what I try to be for people,
Yeah, I
There
deeply
isn't.
honor that. I really do. Yeah, I deeply honor that, because that's the other thing I was going to ask you too, just from, on a human level, at first after this awakening, did you find that I mean, were there any struggles in terms of who you thought you were as a human being, and your personality, and, all of those parts of being human that are just, our for lack of a better word, our rational selves.
Hmm.
Uh, I didn't know if there was any, in terms of any struggles with, being presented suddenly with energy that you maybe had not been in touch with previously, or that it manifested differently.
I'm not going to say for sure, but I don't remember that in the beginning because
Huh.
I was in such an atmosphere of this is a grand awakening. This is a beautiful experience. Everything that's happening to you is a great thing. That was the atmosphere that I was in. So I don't remember that now. Being here in Pennsylvania, I had a reawakening about 5 years ago. That was, I mean, blow the head off everything you could ever imagine, a kind of experience. And nobody here is doing that. And I have kids, so I have to be out in the world with the kids' friends' parents and try to be normal or whatever that means. It's like this weird life I'm
Yeah.
living. So that experience I had about 5 years ago was I think that's when I fully got pulled out of my reality. I don't know if it was because of the juxtaposition of everything around me, because I wasn't in an environment where everyone else was having the same experience. Um, but I don't remember that happening in the beginning because my environment was so open to it. Even just being in LA, in a city, everybody's a weirdo. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And so, what is reality? When you're in a place like that, what is reality?
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of creating their own reality. But when you're in a place where it's very 9 to 5, certain political viewpoints, certain money, viewpoints, and everybody's kind of a part of that, and you're not. That's when it got weird for me.
Oh, wow.
After this other awakening that I had. That's when everything started to get a little strange for me. So now it just all feels like a dream. I don't know, I'm in a place now where it's like it's not real. It's not real. We're having this exchange. You and I are having this exchange from some energetic consciousness of light somewhere. And that's what it is for me. That's what life is for me now. But I'm helping other people who are starting to disconnect, and it's scary. And I'm like, I know it's scary. I know how scary it is.
Wow. Yeah. And I
Because
and I just can imagine how comforting it could be. And also, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know what I don't know if what the right word for this is, but I guess I could use a lot of words for it, but that just knowing that there's someone who, that someone who understands this and has been through this.
yeah,
Uh, yeah. And I'm assuming you can't necessarily, it's not about having all the answers for them. Is it more about guiding them to, because they already, as it said earlier, I believe, or if my memory serves me correctly, not that I remember very well, but that it's all within them, but it's just a matter of trusting and letting
exactly.
that unfold how it does for each person. And
Yeah, it's always, I mean, I can help people find, the energy will find certain blocks in people. It's always like guiding them to it to see if they can find it. But if they have trouble finding it, then I see it. And so, okay, so I'll suggest this or I'll suggest that. And then we can get there. And then the energy can pull stuff out of people if they're willing. Obviously, if they're not willing, if they're not ready and they're not willing, that's not going to happen. But if they're willing and they're ready, the energy. So it is like a kind of accelerated process when I work with people. But no, it's always guiding people back into themselves. Like, the answer. If someone asks me a question that's kind of like, what should I do here? What should I do there? It's usually guiding them back into themselves, trying to get them into that place where they can find that answer within themselves. So let's go here. So let's go here. So let's remove this block so you can go here. And so once you get there, now what do you feel? It's that kind of work. It's more guiding people to their own answer.
yeah, that's beautiful. And I was going to ask as well if did you find for yourself that this also is that this process has allowed you to be more fully human? In other words, because it's all happening in here, so to speak. Uh, getting more in, in touch with, and I always love the term divine, a divine human being. But I also realize that there is that human aspect of this. And is it also about more fully inhabiting
Uh, yes, if you
the
mean,
human being? Yeah.
yes, if you mean by human being conscious and alive and loving and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. My teacher, I have a teacher now named Danny who always talks about that. People have lost their humanity, in war and all of those things. It's like we just need to find our humanness again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, one of my main, a huge thing for me is animals. I mean, I'm a vegan, and I just it's those things where like, can we just all be human? Can we just all like come back in, embrace our humanness, and just see? Can we just see?
Is it, I wonder if in some cases, if it is that, that I've always wondered, I have met certain people, and I'm just curious if what your experiences have been, who I sense have had. Now, I can say for myself, I have not had those kinds of energetic experiences. Evidently my path has been different. I don't really know, but anyway, we're not. And of course, at the same time, though, I realize this is, I really want to hear from you.
No, I
But I
love to
was
hear.
wondering,
I love to have. Sorry, I love to have an equal exchange. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have come upon people before that I've gotten this, intuitive sense. Not that I want to get wrapped up in thinking that I know anything or that I'm really sensing something, but I get a sense sometimes that I feel an energy from people that maybe, and there's no way for me to know, because I learned the hard way very early on, asking people about it sometimes actually it kind of leads them in another direction, or it's that they don't really want to necessarily go there. But I definitely over the years have encountered people that I sense that there's something there, that that the comedian, maybe it's that the Kundalini is moving, uh that so there's been some sort of opening. But it's amazing to me, and I'm just wondering if this is something that you've experienced sometimes, that people maybe have had a partial opening, or there has been a partial, I don't even know if that makes sense or not, but just that people have had glimpses.
Yeah, I honestly don't tune usually tune into people unless they ask me to. So,
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I know what you mean. Sometimes you can just feel it. Sometimes
Yeah.
with people you can just feel it, and I know what you mean
Yeah.
by that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but I mean, I would trust your intuition. Your intuition knows, and I think we all have different gifts too. Like you might be sensing something that maybe I don't have the ability to sense either. So I'm trying to think if I've ever like done that, like, oh my gosh, that person is awake or that person's had an awakening. I think I've gotten used to approaching people in a certain way where because I know how strong my energy is and it can really trigger things. So I've gotten used to approaching people kind of like this. Uh, Somebody recently
Yeah.
called me an ice queen, and I'm like, it's not like I'm not trying to be an ice queen. I'm just trying to give people their space, unless
Yeah.
they ask. And then unless they're like, I want to engage, I want your energy, then obviously I open up. But I try not to read people or, I kind of try consciously kind of to do that because, yeah, it makes people uncomfortable.
And I was also, it would be really wonderful to hear too, just anything you might share about, that was there in a sort of an aha moment, or a moment in which you knew you wanted to do this work with people. Just anything that you might share about that, how that journey began and what that was like for you to, once you realized that's what you were feeling called to do.
At the what in that first awakening at the ashram. a lot of people were getting what they call Davy Bob, which is when the energy comes through you to work with someone else, or that like the mother manifests through you. So people would go into all kinds of manifestations of the divine. There was a guy who always manifested Hanuman, and like all the deities would come through us. Everybody at the ashram, almost everybody at the ashram at the time. And during that time, she would also move around through us to bless other people in the room.
Mm.
So right at that very first year, the energy was already moving through me. Now this was all under the kind of watch of my guru. So it was as if he was working through us too, you know what I mean? Because he was giving Shaktipat, so it was all kind of under his, I don't know, umbrella, I guess you would say. And so for years I did Shaktipat through him, but with his guidance. So he gave me permission to give Shaktipat, and I had to do certain practices to, advance my energy enough to be able to give Shaktipat. But it was always with the guys that he was the one really giving Shaktipat. But I had started in those early years, and then there was a point where I had to leave him because the energy was just moving me in different directions. So I actually was doing massage work for a while, and I found that I couldn't do massage work without allowing the energy to come through.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like she wanted to do certain work, and I was just like in a chiropractor's office doing a massage, so I couldn't allow like this weird voice to come through, and breathing a lot of times, or coughing. Like that's how I would release energy, was cough, or she would do certain breath, and then if I wouldn't allow it to come through, I'd get sick.
Mm.
So I was like,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore. So then I started doing these kind of Shakti massages. So I would tell people, like, we're going to do a massage, but I'm going to let the Shakti come through. I did that for a little while. But then in our Western culture, people would often mistake that as sexuality. Yeah. So I had some problems with that. So I had to stop doing that. This whole neo-tantra thing is just I'm not into it.
Yeah.
So then what? Then actually, it was with my ex-husband when we were first together. She would just start speaking to him. But she would speak to him, like we'd be sitting in the room meditating, and I would just start saying things to him, and Shakti would start saying things to him, through me. But he wouldn't be speaking back, but she would be reading his thoughts or whatever and having a conversation with him.
Mm.
And then it just got to the point where then he would start speaking back. And so we'd be having these conversations. So it started, the current work I'm doing really started with him. It was more out of a necessity just to work with him.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
yeah. And then I just started, but I mean, the Shaktipat evolved out of, work with being with my guru. But she's evolved it. I started doing things that he didn't approve of in the way I was doing it, because I just surrendered to the Shakti and I let her do what she wanted to do. But he did not like the way that looked. So yeah, so it's evolved, and I just I honestly just surrendered to the divine. And I also help people. That's also what I help people to do. I help them to find whatever their purpose is, if you want to use that word,
Yeah.
and to let it evolve from their inner self. Not thinking with their mind, I should do it this way, this person did it that way. No, what's in your heart? What does the divine want to do through you? Can you fully surrender to that? Because that's what I do. My goal is just to fully surrender to the divine. So that's how it's evolved into what it is today. Yeah, so it's been a process, and it'll probably still keep evolving.
Yeah, that's I'm wondering as well, just as far as what it's been like for you to actually see that people are benefiting from your help. You're helping them as they navigate all this. I mean, what that's been. I started to say what that's been like for you personally. I don't know if that's the right word in this case or
It
not.
is.
I assume that there's part of this that's very impersonal as well. I'm saying that like a question.
Well, it is, because I have to say, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love it. I mean, that's, what better, and it's probably an ego thing, but what a better feeling in the world is there than seeing you're actually helping I'm sure it's an ego thing, but I still love it. I still love it. I'm just, there's no better benefit to the work than knowing that you're actually helping someone on their journey. It is what it is.
Yeah, and I really do deeply honor that as someone who, while I haven't had these particular energetic experiences, my path was more of the kind of the going through the dark night of the soul, and I don't know what I would call it exactly, but it's just knowing that there's someone who that gets it, so to speak, and that can help you walk through these, and I've known a lot of people over the years that have had to walk that alone and walk that path alone. And interestingly enough, sometimes, finding that, helping other people walk that path. And to me, that's just something that's incredibly sacred. There's just something very, very deeply sacred about that. This is not an opinion, but that's what I feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, there have been a lot of times when I've had to do it alone, and I know we all have to. Um, but I really feel that we're here as a one soul, all of us are one. And so we're not helping someone else. We're identifying with the truth of our own being through that being. There's
Yeah.
nothing in anyone else that isn't in me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
helping, quote unquote, helping someone to clear something it's just a part of me. It's a part of us. It's a part of everything.
Yeah, and I know that in this day and age, there are and there's no judgment here, but I know that, and I ultimately found myself doing this at early stages of the journey, chasing enlightenment and wanting to to get there, so to speak, and to transform to higher levels of consciousness. Do you find this in some ways? Is it like this beautiful surprise to find out that we are that already? And that there again, that's not an opinion, but that it's all within us. It's that we can't go seek. I mean, I know seeking, it seems like it's so much a part of the journey for so many people, but that's maybe what I was speaking of. I think that's where the hide and seek thing came from. In other words, we get a sense of what our nature is, but we hide from it, and yet we're out seeking, trying to find it somewhere
Mhm.
else. And
Yeah.
don't know if that makes sense or not, or if I don't know if that
Yeah, I don't know if
resonates or
that's a
not.
question, but it's a true statement, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I'll see people recognize that. I mean, obviously, I've been doing that my whole life. I see people recognize that within themselves, but then they go and keep seeking. So it's like that game we play within ourselves. I don't know. I don't even know. Maybe I still do it. I don't know if I still do it. I'm not allowed to go to teachers much anymore. If I really get called to go to someone or do something, I will. But usually if my friends are all like, oh, I don't even have many friends anymore. But people I know, they're like, oh, you should go see this teacher. Every time I ask, I get a no. No.
Wow,
No.
yes.
No.
Yeah.
But sometimes I am called to join a group or do something, and then I do it. And I'll stay with that until the energy usually pulls me back out of it. So, yeah. But then, I mean, there's a point probably where maybe we're not seeking, but we just want to go be with someone's energy
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
just for the beauty of
I
it.
because I definitely do it too. I didn't want to imply by any means that this was something that I have become immune from, that there seems like it feels like it's just part of the journey in some ways, that that finding something out there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then setting it aside, once there's this recognition that it's whatever we need for a moment, and then that moment passes. And I've also been the person who that moment passed long ago, and I'm still, trying to get something from something yeah.
So another interesting query is, so is it seeking or is it a knowing within you that there's something available for you still to be seen? And I mean,
Ah,
but maybe that's the same thing.
yeah,
Um, because I know there's definitely still things I'm seeking for.
yeah.
But is that a knowing that that's available? And yeah, it's a question I've been tossing around.
I'm so glad that that came to that. There's a part of me that I unfortunately I've always, for most of my life, wanted to be very logical and rational, and then, but I would have moments where I clearly wasn't, and that's what I love about these conversations. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that you are. Sometimes my questions can be a little bit. And I love how you said that. It didn't even feel like a question at all. But what's weird is there's been this learning to just let it come through, and yeah, I'm very appreciative that you saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that whatever it was that I said resonated. Yeah.
Yes.
It was said like a
Yeah.
question. I didn't know the answer, but yeah, I don't know if it was a question or not. Yeah.
I mean, for me, the ultimate seeking is God, right? Because
Yeah.
every night I lay down to bed and I'm just like, God, I love you. 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 And is that a seeking? Maybe, I think that's still a seeking.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, so, or a longing. I like the word longing.
Yeah.
One of my students got really upset with me for a while because I used to talk about the longing and even a longing for like a physical beloved because he just thought I shouldn't be longing. And,
Mm.
but for me, that longing is like the depth of my soul. It's the depth of my beingness. It's the longing for divinity, the longing for the divine, the longing for truth. If you're not longing, then what? I don't know. For me, it's a very deep, it's a very deep longing.
Yeah, and I get the sense that that is one of those human universals. I don't know that every culture necessarily, and this is just me musing out loud. I think I'm trying to remember. I feel like it is in Portugal. I could be completely wrong about this. That there is actually a word for this in the Portuguese language. I think it's saudade, Saudade, but I think that has to do with longing. Uh, I think there's, and I could be completely wrong about all this, but I feel like I have read that before, that
Oh, I want
there's
to look
this,
that up.
and they have music, their traditional music. I can't remember the name of it, the form of music, but it is essentially, you hear that longing, you feel it
Mm,
when someone is performing that. So I just
yeah,
find that interesting that, in various cultures, there's different ways of expressing that.
that's like deep love and that's depth. To me, that's yummy. Like, what? That is God to me. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
deepness of God.
Absolutely, absolutely. I am so grateful that you've taken this time to be in this space with me. I think that is all that is coming up for me at the moment, and so
Okay.
I just wanted to give you a little bit of space and time. If there's anything that I had not thought of or anything, there's no expectations, but I just wanted to give you some space and time. If there is anything that you feel moved to share, or
I think we've covered it. I think that you're a really beautiful soul and you're obviously doing your purpose and your heart is grand and I'm happy to share this time with you and I'm glad you found me through the beautiful John Burney.
I could not. That's what I love about this. These seeming coincidences that happen, and for whatever reason, I don't know rationally, but it just sometimes I encounter or come across people, and there was no expectations at all. It's just essentially like, I think this is. I'll reach out. I don't know if there's anything there or not, and just see what happens. But I
Mhm.
appreciate those very kind words, and I very much feel the same way about you as well, and your
Thank
openness
you.
and willingness to speak about your journey is something that I certainly don't take for granted.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you again so much for your time. It's great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.